I'm Nisha DeGaring.
And I'm Doug Jessop. Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other.
And these stories deserve to be passed down. It is time for Family Heritage Stories.
Welcome to Family Heritage Stories, where we help people understand where they came from. Things like traditions, values, and culture.
How are those stories passed down from generation to generation? Through words, through deeds, through stories.
We all benefit from heroes among us. Now, they're going to say, it's just part of the job. But it's more than that. It's time for Hero Salute Stories. Hi guys, welcome to this episode of Family Heritage Stories with what just might be the most interesting woman in the world, Mary Howell. So Mary, thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely.
So the reason why I kind of am having fun with the interesting thing is you've done, I think, what can considerably called some crazy stuff in your life.
I have.
What in the world possessed you and put you in the position of doing said crazy stuff?
Oh, goodness. I have always been an adventurer from the time that I was very little, and I've always loved exploring. And so my passion for that, along with my family history of always kind of being in the go. My dad was a police officer. He was also a veteran. My grandfather was a rum runner. So we have been on both sides of the
Wow.
aisle, both sides of the law.
Okay.
I think that I just have the sense of adventure and also the sense to serve in my blood from a very young age.
Okay, let's start with your dad. Okay, so police officer, veteran, fill me in on some details.
So my dad served in the Army during Vietnam. He was supposed to be a paratrooper and then ended up moving into the military police. And he was an Army CID agent for a while also in Belgium.
Wow.
At NATO headquarters.
Wow. Okay, so where were you born?
I was born in Greenville, Texas.
Okay, so you've got the family history of service. How did you get into serving?
So from a very little age, so when my dad came back from Vietnam, he did a couple of different things. And one of them was that he was a police officer. And I watched him go and be a police officer in that uniform, and just that he was really proud of doing that. And I also watched Rescue 911 from a young age.
Okay.
And I knew that I loved the medical side
Oh,
and not as much the law enforcement side.
okay.
And so when I said I grew up, I was going to be a paramedic.
Oh,
And by the time I was out of high school, I had got my EMT basic.
okay. How do you get into the paramedic group with firefighting? What's kind of the pathway?
Yeah, so for me, in high school, I did Health Occupation Students of America, which is called, it's HOSA, the HOSA program. And there's a lead up of classes that you take. And your senior year, you get your CNA and your EMT basic. And so as an EMT basic high school student, I was doing ride-alongs in the ambulance.
Oh, wow.
So while other kids were, maybe having swim parties or whatever, I was doing hospital rounds in the ER or in the ICU, and also actually riding on the ambulance, doing ride-alongs there, doing my student hours.
Now I'm going to kind of put you on the spot.
Okay.
So here's the deal. I've interviewed a number of firefighters and such, and how do I put this politely? It's a different breed of people, okay? Because
It is. It's very
basically,
true.
it's kind
Yeah.
of like, okay, a normal person does not say, hey, let's go run into, a burning building.
Right. Yep.
A normal person does not necessarily say, hey, let's go check out this accident, because you're going to see some nasty stuff.
Yeah.
Was there a particular call when either you were training or just kind of going that you saw something and you go, either that kind of tipped the scale saying, okay, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do, or boy, I don't know?
My very first call on my very first ride, as a senior in high school, the first exposure to actually being an EMS was a cardiac arrest,
Oh,
where the person had been kind of talking, going in and out of consciousness. It was a load and go, which means that we get on scene, we package them up really quickly because we know that they're super critical, and we'll do whatever treatments that we need to do en route to the hospital. And by the time, so somebody sent me out of the ambulance to get an oxygen bottle. And by the time that I got back in, they were doing CPR. And the supervisor at the time was a female, and she was about my size. And she was like, "Hey, you," because I was this. She called me white shirt because everybody else was in red shirts. She's like, "Hey, you white shirt, come over here, do CPR." And I felt what it felt like to actually be in the action and to see the patient's loved ones standing outside the ambulance.
oh, geez. Yeah,
And
it's not a dummy anymore. This is the real
not
deal.
a dummy. This is the real deal. And there's, I don't know if this is too graphic for television, but there's vomit on the floor and people are trying to intubate her and we're pushing drugs and we're getting IVs and it's intense in the back of a very small ambulance, and there's probably 4 of us that were back there. And I knew in that moment, I was like, this is home.
Well, another episode of Family Heritage Stories and Mary Howe. I'm Doug Jessop.
Thank you for joining us for this special episode of Family Heritage Stories. If you would like to help us continue with this great and important programming, please visit herosalutestories.org.
Every veteran has a story that deserves to be remembered. At Family Heritage Stories, we collect, preserve, and share those personal experiences of our veterans. Your donations help us document and honor those veterans and their legacies for generations to come. Join us in ensuring that their legacies live on. Donate today at herosalutestories.org.
There's a special bond between grandparents and grandkids.
Tell me a story about your grandma or grandpa.
My grandma Polly was one I was closest to. She and my grandpa lived in Willits, California all my life. And my dad's parents were in Kentucky. So I only saw them like twice. I grew up in California. And they were all gone by the time I was 12 years old. But I have very vivid memories of my grandma Polly. I got to see her often, and I always felt like I was her favorite. But in talking to my other cousins, they all felt like they were her favorites, and so, but I was. And I spent like 2 weeks every summer with her at her house, and I remember vividly her having a collection of Hummels figurines, and I would play on this green carpet or rug on the floor with her Hummels as dolls, as toys, and she would sit in this purple chair knitting. She knitted, cross-stitched, tried rugs, and sewed and everything, and she would let me play with these dolls when I was like 5 or 6 years old and just sit there and watch me as I played. And I've got so many memories of her, but that's one of my favorite ones, actually. She allowed me I never broke anything, so it was just
Okay, so let's get equal time to the guys.
okay.
Tell me about one of your grandfathers.
Okay, my grandpa Louis was my grandma Polly's husband, and he told great stories. And I don't know if he made them up, some of them, or some of them were true, but he was very animated and would do voices and gestures. And he told a story of my Uncle Jimmy. His whole family, for his legacy is laundry, and they had laundromats. He had 6 brothers and 1 sister. They all had laundromats in different places in California and across the country. And he told a story of when every year, there was a man in town named Dirty Bill. He lived in a shack. He worked for the railroad, never bathed. And this would be in the early 1900s. And the firemen would go to Dirty Bill's house once a year before Christmas, and they'd strip him down. He'd be fighting the whole way, and they'd clean him up, and they'd send his clothes to the laundry and all his sheets and things like that. And then my Uncle Jimmy brought the laundry back to Dirty Bill, and Dirty Bill invited him in and offered him a piece of lemon meringue pie. And my Uncle Jimmy says, "Oh, I love a lemon meringue pie." And he looked at it, and it was just covered with ants. And just like the whole place was just filthy dirty. And he says, "Oh, no, it's covered with ants." And he goes, "Well, too bad for the ants." And he, cut himself a big slice and just ate it, ants and all. And so he would tell stories like that. And that story actually is true because my Uncle Jimmy confirmed it.
Broadcasting from Lanny Bernard Gallery, you're watching Family Heritage Stories. We'll be right back.
All right, Jack. It's Paul from 35. Fancy a brew, pal? Dash of milk. 2 sugars, yeah?
Kindness.
So it is chariots.
A small flame
Thank you. There we go now.
that burns bright,
Alright, stand back.
that sees crisis
Call an ambulance. You're going to be alright.
and sparks compassion
All right, keep them coming.
and turns a moment into a movement.
Good boy.
It's a simple thing, but it can change the world.
Milky. No sugar.
Your kindness is powerful. We can help you share it.
John Taylor. So, do you know how to make holy water? You boil the hell out of it. You want to know how to catch a polar bear? Okay, you get up, you cut a hole in the ice, and then you spread peas around it. And so when the bear comes to take a pee, you kick him in the ice hole.
I'm Katie Higley. You're watching Family Heritage Stories.
This holiday, give the priceless gift of stories. Imagine capturing the voices, the wisdom, the humor of your loved ones. Talking from personal experience, I promise it will be cherished for generations. To schedule an interview with either yourself or one of your loved ones, contact Krista at fedorafoundation.org.
Have you ever wondered how an object becomes important enough to be passed down from generation to generation? Later in the show, we share one of our viewers' treasures remembered.
Everybody comes from somewhere.
What does heritage mean to you?
Hi, guys. This is Doug Jessop. Welcome to this episode of Family Heritage Stories. With me, Jerry Este. Okay, now apparently it's a Cajun name, but you're not Cajun.
No, I am not.
Okay. So where do you call home from a heritage standpoint?
Utah.
Okay. Now, unless you're Native American, somebody probably had to move here. So who moved to Utah way back when, do you think?
My great grandfather
Hmm.
came from Wales,
Okay.
and then he moved to Utah. Hopkins Matthews.
Hopkins Matthews.
Yes.
Okay, which one was his first name?
Hopkins.
Okay, you know I'm teasing you.
Yes.
Okay. So now Wales, southern part of England.
Mm-hmm.
Just out of curiosity, have you ever had a chance to go to Wales?
No.
Okay,
I wished I could.
that'd be a fun trip. The name of the show is Family Heritage Stories. What does heritage mean to you?
Well, I think it's really important that we know where we came from
Mm-hmm.
so that we can do our very best to carry that on through our family to our children, to our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. But we definitely need to know where we came from.
There's been a lot of technological advances in your lifetime. Pretty sure there was no cell phones when you were a kid.
No.
There were radios.
Yes.
Do you remember the first car you drove?
Well, it was a 59 Chevrolet. And I didn't drive it very often.
Okay.
Once in a while, I could take it to school.
Uh-huh.
But in my senior year.
There
But
you
that
go.
was the first car. I learned to drive a stick shift pickup on a gravel road.
Sometimes our kids and our grandkids don't understand, the things that you have seen in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's probably one of the biggest things that if somebody, were kind of looking at your life, what's some of the big things and events that have happened during your lifetime that mean something to you?
Well, the things that stand out to me, of course, 9/11 was a horrible time. It was the same year that my dad died. He died right after that happened, and I remember the moon landing. I was in high school when John Kennedy was killed, and I remember that day. I remember so plainly that day that happened, and what a shock that was.
With another episode of Family Heritage Stories and Jerry Este, I'm Doug Jessop. We'll be right back.
You learn a lot about traditions, values, and culture when you travel.
It's time for vacation locations.
Objects with stories, our treasures remembered.
The GS on this saddle stands for George Summers. Well, back in the early 1930s, this gentleman would go to the coffee shop, and on his way home, he'd stop by a saddle shop in Garland and give what he could to get his special saddle. Some weeks it was 25, 50 cents. After 2 years of contributing for this saddle, he decided to tell his wife about it. Well, she was not thrilled, and she made him sell the saddle back to the maker. Fast forward 60 years, a gentleman by the name of Stan Summers was hauling propane in Collinston. When a Mr. Jensen came out, they started to talk. He asked his name and said, his name is Stan Summers. He said, come here, you need to check this out. So they walked into his tack shop and uncovered a saddle. It's more than a saddle, it was the saddle. And he had a silver gaucho on the back and uncovered this GS. Had an emotional moment there. Made him an offer of the saddle, and end up that Stan gave it to his father a couple years before he died. And here's the fun part. That saddle, it went back into the barn that the grandfather built because it just happens to be the house that Stan Summers lives in. The saddle he never sat in, but the home his grandson lives in and appreciates it every day. Everyone has a story. Objects with stories are treasures remembered.
Everyone has a story.
Sometimes those stories are told through music.
Right or wrong, I'll always love you. Though you're gone, I can't forget. Right or wrong, I'll keep on dreaming. Still I wait with that same old regret. All alone, I knew I'd lose you. Still I pray that you'll be true. In your heart, please just remember. Right or wrong, I'm still in love with you. Hey, singer!
What makes you smile? Spry Natural Xylitol mints make me smile. I think it might help you too.
It's our honor to to be able to help people remember where they came from.
The Fedora Foundation supports the collection, preservation, and distribution of diverse stories of traditions, values, and culture, right here on TV and online as well at familyheritagestories.org.
How do you want to be remembered? With another episode of Family Heritage Stories, I'm Nisha Dagarin.
And I'm Doug Jessop.
Though you're gone.